What we're going to talk today is packet capture. It's a little bit of an odd topic because it's not something that you would think about doing unless you've got a reason to want to. But we'll talk a little bit about what it is, how you do it, and give you a couple of demos on how you can do this yourself just on a test system. I'm going to leave my slides up like this because I find when I switch back and forth between a full screen display and a live demo, my laptop doesn't always like to do that correctly. So I'm just going to leave it like this, if that's okay. If you haven't gotten the slides already, they're over on Discord in the ACM webcast-content channel. And you're welcome to keep those for future reference, and also because the links in that PDF are clickable, so you don't have to try to write them down.
Sorry to
Okay.
interrupt.
Yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but the main screen is showing Discord, not your slides.
So for some reason I have picked the
Keith, that's just
wrong.
your end. For attendees, they're seeing Bill right now. So
Okay,
you can
sorry.
change your view. There should be a little drop down that allows you to change what screen share you're seeing.
Okay, thank you. Sorry about that.
Not a problem. Great. So I want you to start off with a kind of a quick mental exercise. Take a look down at your forearm. There's not much going on. But if you took that forearm and put it under a microscope, what you would see are the individual blood vessels near the surface with blood streaming by very quickly and at a rate that you couldn't follow. And this is, I think, a very good analogy for what we're about to do. On the network cable that leads to your laptop or your desktop, or if you're able to watch the radio signals for a laptop that's connected by Wi-Fi, what you would see are individual pieces of conversation that are chopped up into chunks. The chunks are maybe about 1,400 bytes each because of the way that the networking was designed. But every time you make a connection out to a web server, such as going to www.google.com or looking at something on Amazon or watching this webcast or typing something in Discord, what you send is chopped up into 1,400 byte chunks and then sent over a wire or a radio in the case of Wi-Fi. When the response comes back, that traffic is also chopped up into small chunks and then it's sent back to your laptop as if you had, all of these conversations interleaved with each other. So every one of those packets has to declare where it's coming from and where it's going to. And each of those packets then is carried from your laptop out to the server you're talking to, and then the responses come back the same path until they land back at your laptop. So it feels to your web browser like there's this constant conversation between you and the other end, but it's all mixed together into this one long stream of stuff. Okay. If you're watching something like a long movie, I'm going to say about 4 gigabytes is maybe about the size of an high def movie download. If you divide that by 1,400 bytes per packet, simply downloading a movie is about 2.8 million packets coming down over your Wi-Fi or your wired connection. And the nice part is that your laptop, specifically the operating system, takes those, it makes sure that all those packets arrived in the right order, that there aren't duplicates, that there aren't missing packets. That's all handled at the very lowest levels. And so by the time your operating system hands that movie up, the application that requested it gets just a 4 gigabyte long thing of movie stored to disk. All right. And as I mentioned, these are interleaved. So if you're downloading 2 movies at the same time, or you're watching a Zoom video like this, and you're watching something over on YouTube, and you're typing on Discord, and you're sending email, and you're checking to see if you have new email, all of those things get mixed in together, come in over your network connection, and then when they arrive at your laptop, they get sent up to the appropriate program that requested that information. When you start looking at these on a network cable, you can use a program called a sniffer or a packet capture tool. There are lots of names for them. And this is a specialized program whose job it is to look down at the network cable and show you everything going in or out. It is way too much to watch live, but we're going to talk a little bit today about how you can work with these packets and save them and analyze them later. But we'll show you a live demo in just a minute. The simplest way to do this is to use a packet capture tool that shows you just one line on your screen for every packet that goes by. But there are a lot of choices on how you show this. And what you may want to do is simply tell a sniffer, capture 10,000 packets, and then give me a summary at the end. Tell me what you saw, but don't show me every single individual line. There are lots of choices, and we'll talk about those. So the request, how does this work? Your sniffer program starts up and it goes down and it asks a library on the computer, which is just a set of code that's shared by a lot of programs. It says, I'd like to see all the packets coming in on, and I'm going to call it ETH0, which on some computers is the first network interface. Depending on your operating system, it may be called something different. Don't worry about that too much. We'll talk about how to find the interfaces on your system. But your sniffer tells libpcap, show me all the packets coming in as they arrive. libpcap then goes down to the operating system kernel, which is the lowest level piece of software in the computer. It's the part that handles the network interfaces and memory and all the low level stuff. libpcap tells the OS, would you please hand me all the stuff coming in on that interface or going out on that interface? And then when packets arrive, the kernel hands them to libpcap. libpcap hands them up to your sniffer, and then your sniffer displays them, analyzes them, stores them in a database, whatever it was told to do. I want to encourage you to think about this before you go any further. And that is that you are asking for information from a network cable that may not be appropriate to even watch. There are times when you might start up a sniffer and you would be able to see the passwords that people are typing as they go to log into remote services. That is less common today than it was maybe 10 or 15 years ago, but it is still possible. And even if you can't see those passwords, there are a lot of privacy implications for working with traffic going on the network. You can see what machines are talking to which other machines, even if you can't see exactly what they're saying. So if you're doing this on a company network or some other network where you're given the right to use the network, but not necessarily to capture, please get permission first. And if you're not sure if you have permission, please don't do this live. As a general rule, if you're doing this at home on your own private Wi-Fi network, that's generally fine. I think that would be a safe bet. But if you're not sure, get written permission first. So what I'm going to encourage you to do is to install a sniffer. tcpdump is the most basic one that we have. And I say that in the sense that it's been around for a long time. It actually does a reasonably good job of pulling out packets and showing you the relevant pieces, but it's also been around for a long time. There are a lot of other tools available. We'll talk about some of them, and I've got a list of plenty more. But depending on your operating system, try to install this using one of the commands below. If you're on Linux or Mac OS, it's basically available. Mac OS, you need either Homebrew or Mac ports. If you're on Windows with Windows Subsystem for Linux, go ahead and open up a command prompt inside WSL, and then you can install that inside that prompt. If none of those work, we've got one more backup for Windows. You can try the link down at the bottom. It's going to take a little bit more time to go and set it up that way. All right, So let's actually take a look at what we get. The first thing you do is to need to figure out what interfaces are available on your computer. So I'm going to open up a window on my system and run the command tcpdump space dash dash list dash interfaces. And what I get are a list of potential interfaces available for my network. And it even tells you that two of them, EN3 and EN10, are connected to something. In other words, there's a physical cable plugged into that interface, or it has a Wi-Fi connection. You can ignore the ones that say loop back, that's for traffic on your system. But in this case, I happen to know that EN3 at the top of the list is the interface that has the active traffic on my system. So what do you think I'm going to see when I ask a sniffer to show me the packets going in or out of my system while I'm sitting on a Zoom call? Think about that for a second, and I'm going to type in the command sudo tcpdump -i. By the way, does that need to be a little larger? Let me make that a little larger, so it's at least a little bit visible here. Sudo tcpdump space -i space EN3 is what I have for my laptop right here, right now, -qtn. And what's about to come up is a whole bunch of stuff. So all of these lines that are repeating each other, these are from my laptop talking out over a Zoom call. So that port 8801 is the traffic that's going back and forth to the Zoom server. So that's going to be really hard to watch, obviously, but I wanted just to show you what you get out of it. Let's take a look at a little more detail about what shows up on the screen. And I grabbed a packet from a little earlier just to show you the different characteristics of what tcpdump shows you. In blue, I show the two addresses that are used. So 10.0.0.111 happens to be my laptop right here, right now. And on this particular packet, the traffic was going out to 52.205.142.106. That's some machine out on the internet. You also notice that in, I believe, green, the traffic is going from port 49326 on my laptop, going out to port 443 on the internet, on the outside machine's IP address. Now, 49326 is just a randomly picked port. Sometimes it's above 32,000, sometimes it's above 1024, sometimes it's above 48,000. It doesn't matter, but it's a randomly picked port. It has no meaning other than to keep track if there are multiple conversations going at the same time. But what is interesting is the destination port, and that's 443. That's the commonly used port for HTTPS web services, and specifically encrypted web services. It is not the case that every single time you see traffic going to port 443, that must be HTTPS. It actually could be something different. But for this example, I've taken a look at that IP address, and I believe that to be an encrypted web server. Now, at the end of the line that you see here at the top from tcpdump, there is TCP space 35. And what that says is there may be a bunch of stuff that handles the IP addresses and the ports and the flags and a whole bunch of other things that are just too esoteric for this talk. But as part of this conversation, my laptop sent 35 bytes, basically 35 characters worth of stuff, to the other end, and it was probably encrypted, and then the other end would know how to decrypt it and then interpret that. So if I could look inside that packet, what I would probably see is some requests like, give me a web page. It might be something different. It might be, give me an image. It might be, tell me if this page has been updated or since, or purchase this product off of Amazon.com. There are lots of things it could be, but give me a web page is probably a good guess. Now, if you have that tool installed and you want to give this a try yourself, there are a couple of things that you can try. The first one is to leave off the -n from the previous command. I'm going to back up 2 slides to slide 9, and I'm going to show you that original command. It's sudo tcpdump -i eth0 or whatever your interface is, -qtn originally. And I'm suggesting leave that -n off. But you have to be patient in the process, and I'll show you why. Here we go. So this is the one that I'm interested in. I'm going to leave off the n, and let's see what happens. And it seems to take a while, but now I'm getting host names. ns2.aaron.net is being put in there instead of the IP address of that machine. Now, why don't we just do this all the time? Well, it'd be great to know what the host name is rather than have to go out and look it up by hand. And the answer is it takes a long time to do that. In computer years, it takes forever. So what you usually do is you capture the packets as is without trying to turn those IP addresses into host names. And then later, if you want to go back and look at those packets and then say, would you please turn them into host names now when you've got some time to do it? It's better to do that as an afterthought rather than during the time when you're doing the capture. These packets fly by so fast that if you try to do this and you try to look up those host names, you're going to miss tons of packets. They will just never be seen by your sniffer because your sniffer's taking too long on every packet. Okay. If you change the -q in the command, I'm going to put the -n back in that says don't look up host names. But if you change the -q into -v, I'm hoping you can see that. It's probably down at the bottom edge of your screen, but sudo tcpdump space -i en3 space -v-tn. I'm changing quiet to verbose. Let's see what we get. And now I get a whole bunch more information on every single packet, including some stuff that just looks weird. It's complaining about bad checksum. That actually isn't a problem. It just happens to be a little oddity in how the packets were captured. But you can still see the length of the packet. You can see the source IP address, 10.0.0 to 10.0.0.111 to 144.195, 12.139. I can see the source port 63028. I can still see the destination port 8801. But now I get some more detail about the individual headers. It's probably more than you want to see at any given moment. All of this time, we've been trying to look at this traffic, but we can't see what's going on inside the packet. So I'm going to show you how to do that live on your own system. You need to do 2 things. One is you want to watch the traffic going out to a particular computer that's going to be unencrypted. And the second thing you're going to do is you're going to ask for a web page from that computer. So the 2 commands, the 2 things you'll need to do are start up a sniffer using the command in slide 11. And then you're going to ask in a browser to look at a web page that happens to be on that IP address, 174.143.211.1.58. So I'm going to paste that command in here. You can copy and paste it out of the slide PDF if you choose. And in this case, remember, I'm working on a laptop that uses EN3 as its network interface. I'm going to run sudo tcpdump-i en3-qtn. This is all the stuff we've done before. I'm going to add two more things on to the end. The first is -x. And this -x says, I want to show more detail about this particular packet. And you'll see what that is in just a minute. And then the final thing that you always put at the end of the command line is called a filter. In this case, I say only show me packets if they're going to host 174.143.211.58. And in particular, if that IP address is the destination of that traffic, not the source of it. So I'm only looking at the outbound requests to that particular machine. And I happen to know already that that's the IP address for www.stearns.org. So why didn't I use a different website like activecountermeasures.com or google.com or whitehouse.gov, a public server? This is technically public. The reason is I know that this machine will respond to unencrypted requests, and I want to show you what happens when you do this. So I'm going to start up that command, and it's going to sit there because it doesn't have anything to show right off the bat. Now I'm going to open up this particular URL. I'm going to copy it out of the PDF, and then I'm going to open up a new tab. I'm going to paste that URL in, and I'm going to go there. Now, up comes a pretty nondescript page of an old project that I haven't touched in decades, literally decades. But all of a sudden, there's some stuff that showed up on the screen in the background by my sniffer. So I'm going to back up a little bit here. And there's a little bit of early stuff where I simply set up the connection. And then finally down here, my sniffer sees that I'm going out to that computer and I'm asking for a URL that ends in /askfirst, which is just a directory on that web server. It also shows the name of the host that that person requested. Get www.stearns.org after a field called host, so that when it arrives there, if that web server serves up more than one host name, like www.stearns.org and devel.stearns.org and a bunch of others, we know which server to send it to. So what that -x did is it added all of this. It takes the body of that packet and it shows you it in two different forms. On the left-hand side, you've got the literal bytes that went across the wire in hexadecimal. And you could sit there and you could convert them one at a time over into their ASCII equivalents. Or you could just look over on the right-hand side, and this right-hand column shows you the equivalent text for what's going by in the body of that packet. Everything up until now that I showed you was one line per packet or maybe two, but nothing about what's in the body. Now you can actually see what's going from your laptop to the server at the other end, including the ASCII text if it's a plain text request. You can even see what type of laptop this is, what type of software I'm using, the fact that it's running on a Mac OS. So I have a Mac laptop that I'm working with. There's a lot of private stuff in here, nothing that I'm worried about you seeing, but this is why we ask you to get permission at first before you try to use this. All right, I'm going to switch back to the presentation. You can do this with any traffic that you can generate. You can watch the traffic on the wire while you switch to some other window and make a request and see what shows up. All right. So back to slide 12. Now, all that we've been doing so far is showing things live while they're on the screen. But you also have the option to save this traffic off to a disk. Why? There are a couple of reasons. First off, processing these packets is very expensive in terms of computer time. Adding host names, doing analysis, even keeping raw statistics on what you've seen go by takes a long time in the computer world. So one approach is to say, I'm going to get a fast sniffer program whose only job is to grab those packets off of a network wire and save them directly to disk, and that's it. It doesn't even show them on the screen. When I do that, I now can take that file, which commonly has an extension like PCAP for packet capture, or PCAP-NG for the next generation of packet capture. There's technically a slight difference between the two, but most packet capture tools and most packet capture file formats kind of just work with each other. I can take that file and feed it into a different program. I can do this while the capture is happening on most operating systems, maybe not Windows, but certainly on Linux and Mac OS. I can do it 2 hours from now when I get into work and I'm starting to analyze the traffic from 6 a.m. this morning. I can do it on a different computer. I can send that file over to a computer that's in a different office, or maybe has a bigger hard drive or more processors or more memory or something, and have it do the analysis. And those two computers don't even have to be the same operating system, let alone the same tool to both capture and analyze. Maybe I have an audit that shows up sometime after the beginning of the year, and somebody wants me to prove that certain traffic went by or that certain traffic did not go by. If I have a packet capture of everything that went by on the wire, I can go back and show them that yes, this traffic did go by, or no, this traffic did not go by during that time frame. I might be even looking for clues later to say, was I infected by this piece of malware at a certain point in time, and be able to go back through these packet capture files and check them one at a time. So this is one of the reasons why saving the disk is so valuable. I can do things later looking at those PCAP files as if I was going back in time to when those packets were actually going by on the wire, and be able to do the same analysis that I could have done if I were watching those packets live. Okay. Let's take a look at how this is done. So what I'm going to do is switch over to a window, and I'm going to save packets in one window, and then I'm going to analyze them in another. So let's take a look here. I'm going to stop this preview capture, and I'm going to write these to a file. I'm just going to put them in /temp. I'm going to call it savepackets.pcap. You'd want to make it something meaningful, like maybe the host name on which it was captured and maybe the date and the time or something like that. But you notice I'm using -W in the case of tcpdump. tcpdump is told to save packets to disk with -W. And I'm just going to start that up now. And it is going to just sit there and not do anything. Well, actually it is doing something, but you just can't see it because tcpdump is no longer showing what's going by, what's happening. It's just doing the job of saving it to disk. So if I look at the directory /temp and I ask for a human readable display, there is a file called savepackets.pcap, which is already 15 megabytes large. just in the few seconds I've been talking, I've already added 15 megabytes of packets to that. And then the beautiful part is I can take that same program or a different sniffer and look at that while the capture is happening. So what I'm going to use is -R to say, read these packets in from disk. And then I give it the name of the file name of the file. temp/savepackets.pcap is the file I want to read in. And I want to show them one line per packet on the screen. I keep forgetting to make the font bigger. Let's try that. And with the hope that that is large enough to read, I'm going to read those packets while they're actively being added to over on the other program. Here's what happens. I'm actually reading from that same file that the first copy is writing to. And you notice down here at the bottom, the last line of output is, hey, wait a second. I tried to read the last packet out of that file, but it's truncated. It's not complete. What the heck's going on here? And that's because you're actively writing to that file while you're reading it in. That's just a warning saying that last packet looks a little short, a little sketchy, but you can do this live. Okay. Now, then that file, that one over in temp, that's up to 73 megabytes worth of packets now. I can move that off to a different system. I can compress it. I can archive it. I can send it off to secondary storage. I can send it to our security team so that they've got some analysis of what's going on. The short version is that you've got the ability to save packets to disk and analyze them later. Okay. tcpdump uses -R to read packets from a file and -W to save packets out to a file. Not all programs do this. So if you go over to the link at the bottom of slide 13, I've got a list of some packet capture programs and the command line parameters that they use to both read and write when they have that ability. We'll talk more about this particular listing in a minute. It's from 2008. It is way out of date, but it still gives you some basic information about the tools. We'll talk about it later. So, as I said, if we tell the capture program to run and do nothing with the packets, just write them out raw as they're seen, then that capture is going to go a lot more quickly. And I can be analyzing this while the capture is happening, or I can wait until later. I can have multiple programs reading from the same interface or file at the same time, which is really nice. I might be starting off with a generic tool like tcpdump just to figure out what's going on. But as soon as I realize that what's happening seems to be happening over DNS, I might start over a second capture program to read from that file that's only focused on DNS traffic. All right, we already did the demo of reading with one and saving with one and reading in with another. So, as I mentioned, try to do as little as possible during the capture portion of the of saving to disk. Just save them raw, and then you can come back later, and if you want to look up additional details or so on, you can do that then. Packet capture files are just files. There's nothing particularly special about them. They're formatted as PCAP files and they hold packets, but they're files. You can transfer them off to a different system. You can compress them. You can save them off to secondary storage. Just be aware that what goes by on the wire, a lot of it's encrypted, and encrypted traffic doesn't compress very well. You'll get it a little bit smaller if you try to compress a PCAP file, but you're not going to save half of your space. They'll still be rather large files. When we did that demo a minute ago, I'm going to switch back to the terminal here. You may remember that, oh, we did, no, actually, that was the previous demo. That's already scrolled off the screen. When we did that test of going to www.stearns.org, I didn't really cover it a lot, but there's a section at the end of the command that says dest host 174.143.211.58. And I just briefly mentioned that this is a filter. All PCAP programs, all sniffers and the libpcap library and the Linux kernel or Mac OS kernel or Windows kernel, whatever you got, know how to filter which packets get read and processed and stored and so on. At the end of that command line is what's called a Berkeley packet filter, or BPF. This is a command that the sniffer gives to libpcap, and libpcap gives to the operating system kernel saying, I'd like packets, but only if they follow these rules. And in this case, I only want to see packets that are going DST to the host, HOST, whose IP address is 174.143.211.58. If it's coming from that host, I don't care. If it's going from or going to or coming from another host, I don't want to see them. Just traffic going out to that computer. So I put a very fine-grained filter of what I want to see. That means that I don't need to process every packet going by on the wire. So I can limit it to just what I care about. We could have done that same demo a few minutes ago by changing that filter to TCP port 80. Remember, websites, unless you move them to someplace else, tend to be on port 80, unencrypted websites. So if we had used TCP port 80 on that command line, we would have said, just give us the HTTP traffic, and we would have seen essentially the same thing. One handy one is if you are SSH'd into a computer and you're trying to capture traffic. Maybe there's some incident going on. Maybe you think there's a piece of malware running on the computer. Maybe you're trying to analyze some fishy behavior by one of the users on that machine. If I SSH to a computer and I want to capture all the traffic going in or out of that computer, guess what? Some of that traffic is my specific SSH session. And so you get this infinite loop where a packet comes by and an SSH packet is used to send me that output. And then that's itself a packet. So I need another SSH packet to send me that output. You get into an infinite loop where every packet you see causes another packet to be generated, and then it just overfloods. You miss what you're trying to look for. So in that case where I'm coming into a computer and I only want to see the traffic that is not SSH, then what I will do is put in a filter that says not TCP port 22. That limits my display to the stuff other than SSH. It's a very handy way to go and clear that out. Now, where did I come up with these? I came up with these from doing this for many years, and thanks to Chris Brenton for his early classes on packet capture and perimeter security and so on. So we'll talk about what options you have in a minute, but you always have a reference to what these filters are, and you can get to it in two different ways. If you have tcpdump installed, you probably can look at what's called a manual page, which are electronic versions of the manuals for the operating system. So if you type the command man pcap filter into a command prompt and it doesn't complain, it comes up with this text, that shows you what the basic filters are that are available to you. If for some reason your operating system doesn't include this, or you get some problems trying to display it, then simply follow the link at the bottom of the page, https://linux.die.net/man/7/pcap-filter. That's an online version of that same manual page that you can always get to, even if your manual pages aren't working, or you're not on an OS that includes them, or this particular manual page isn't installed for some reason. What other sniffers do we have? As I mentioned in the pre-show banter, that question could easily be its own 3-day class. We could all come up with our top 100, and there are just reams of them. But let me give you a couple of examples of them. We'll see them in these upcoming slides, so I'm going to switch right over to them. The first one I want to show you is a tool called Wireshark. And actually, I'm going to switch to a live demo rather than telling you about it, but you can see the screenshot in your slides if you want. And this is Wireshark. Now, what's interesting about the tool, this runs on Linux, Mac OS, and Windows. You can install it right on top of your operating system. It's a graphical tool. And the nice part is that the top part of the display shows one line per packet summaries of each file, just like tcpdump showed you. But the nice part is that when I click on one of these packets, like packet number 47 at the top of my display, what shows up in the middle window is details about that packet. So I get the Ethernet details, I get the MAC address details, IP version 4, source and destination IP address, the ports involved. This happens to be UDP port 1900 traffic. And then down here, it realizes that UDP port 1900 is a protocol called Simple Service Discovery Protocol. It is a simple way for a machine to advertise that it has a service, or for one computer to look up another service on the network. So in this case, the machine 192.168.99.10 is sending out a multicast. Think of it as like announcing itself to the rest of the machines on the network. And it is saying, I am a multi-screen service that you can use. So this could be maybe a display that's saying, if you want to send stuff to me and you don't have a display, you can do that with me. Now, one more thing that's really handy about Wireshark. If I click on one of these lines in this output, the bottom half of my screen switches over to highlight exactly where that traffic lies in the raw packets. So Wireshark is really nice. In fact, I can come down here and I can click on some vague piece of this. And you notice when I click on this bit down here, this line becomes highlighted. It shows me where that is in the readable text version up here. Anyways, very handy. Great if you're trying to both capture traffic and also to analyze it after the fact. It's a great way to look for stuff. The second one that I want to show you is called EtherApe. It's going to be hard to read, but if you pull down the PDF, you can open this up as wide as you'd like. Now, the stuff over on the left-hand side and the bottom is just a little bit too small to be useful, but over on the right-hand side is EtherApe's strength. EtherApe shows you, in this case, your system over here on the left, and it's talking out to different computers, and it gives you their names, it gives you their IP addresses if the name's not easily available. But look at these bars here, these cones. Each cone shows a connection between my laptop and some machine out in the internet, and the bigger the cone, the more traffic you see. So when you run something like EtherApe on a live network interface, and you want to see where all of your bandwidth is going, you can see that right off by just looking and saying, hey, this cone down here looks really large. What's the computer at the other end? And then you can read that right across there. I can't read it. It's too small for me. It's even on my own screen. But when you run this program, you'll see the traffic going by and you'll be able to tell who's using the most right off the bat. It's very handy. So we've been talking about analyzing live traffic. I want to bring up one more example, and this is a tool called PCAP Stats. I wrote it and I can't even remember the name of it. PCAP Stats will read in packets, but then it'll give you statistics on what each of these packets are. How many DNS packets did I have? How many TCP packets did I have? How many UDP packets did I have? Which flags were being used? Are they IP version 4? Are they IP version 6? What are the IP addresses involved? And what are the host names involved if we have them? So what you get are two columns. At the far left are the number of packets of that type. The second column is the number of bytes in all of those packets. And then you get a description in the third column, but over on the fourth column, this one's kind of handy if you're trying to do some more deep analysis. The fourth column holds the filter you would need to put into another tool to see just that type of traffic. So if you're doing analysis and you want to narrow down to one particular type of traffic and you don't feel like looking up some arcane set of words in a PCAP filter man page, PCAP Stats will give you that filter for free, along with some more details about what the ports are and so on. Okay. So what you've gotten are some examples of packet capture tools, what they'll do, how you can save the packets to disk and analyze them later. There is so much more to cover. It's not an exaggeration to say that you could easily do a 2 or 3 or 4 day class on these topics, but I'm going to give you some starting points. I gave you this URL earlier, www.stearns.org/doc/pcap-apps.html. Apologies, it's very old. Tons of stuff is missing from it. I learned the hard way. It takes a lot of time and dedication to keep that list up to date. And I found that I wasn't working on it. So I just said, I'll leave it up there in its current form. But you can head right over to Google and do a search for packet capture program or PCAP app or sniffer. And if you have a particular need, like you need to analyze DNS in particular, that's fine. Put DNS in there as well. And you might find a tool like DNS Top, which just shows you DNS requests and replies and analyzes them in a very succinct way. Beyond tcpdump, we can grab packets, we can show them, we can analyze them, we can save them, we can compress those. We can send out alerts if we see something that looks malicious. A tool like that is called an intrusion detection system or an intrusion prevention system. So an IDS or an IPS is looking for the signature of some known bad traffic, and then it can send you an alert if it sees something that it knows should not be on your network. Now, careful of that word because it's known bad traffic. Somebody had to write up a signature in advance before a tool like an IDS can send out an alert on it. So IDSs are fantastic for looking for known attacks. They're not perfect for looking for unknown stuff. I want to do a quick thanks and then a couple more links, and then we're going to get into questions. Thank you to Shelby, Keith, Chris, Casey, and Bjorn for helping out with this, and also to Bjorn and Renee for being willing to review the slides in advance. The people that wrote these open source tools deserve knighthoods, as far as I'm concerned. There's been a lot of work that a lot of people have put in. So when you use a tool like Wireshark and you're admiring the fact that it's able to analyze tons of different protocols and hand them to you pre-digested, someone took the time to write a tool like that. So send them a thank you or give them a thumbs up whenever you can. We have a lot more on the topic, and I want to point you at some of the blogs that we have. If you follow either of those first two links, PCAP or packet capture on our blog website, those will bring you to a lot of blogs that we have on packet capture in general and specific packet capture techniques and finding the interface on which to listen and so on. We have a lot of other webcasts. So for everybody who's joined us today on Zoom or YouTube, thank you so much. This will be one of the webcasts that falls into that collection. And so you can look at some of the others that have to do with packets by doing that particular search. To take this to the next level, I encourage you to take a look at Chris Brenton's packet decoding class. I gave just the barest surface treatment to what you can do when you read packet off of a network wire. Chris goes into a lot of detail about how this can be done, and he bases this off of decades of experience of packet analysis and sitting up till 3 a.m. trying to figure out why one particular packet happened on his network. It is well worth taking that course if you can. Other resources, a couple of more links that are kind of relevant to this. I'll just leave those there for discussion. So I think that's all I've got. How about we take a look at some questions that have come up since I have been ignoring Discord. What kind of things have come up, guys? And feel free to turn your camera on if you choose.
Well, actually, Bill, I think you did such a great job getting through this, and there's not really a lot of outstanding questions.
I'm glad to hear that. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we were able to cover things. The one thing I was trying to remember, and maybe one of my students remember this, with T-Shark, there's a switch you can use that'll show all the supported display filters at the command line, and you can even search.
Wow.
And I think it's like -E or something like that. What's scary is I know I have it in a class someplace. I'm just having trouble finding the slide to get the exact syntax. But it's cool because you can go through and you can use it with grep to be able to look at, just specific patterns.
Yeah.
I'll keep looking while you guys talk.
T-Shark is built by the same people that wrote the Wireshark tool. If you remember, the Wireshark program is a graphical one, and so you need a desktop display to run it on. T-Shark is the equivalent tool with a lot of the same smarts, but T-Shark is designed to run on a command line, which is much more handy if you're trying to run this on a remote computer over SSH, or you've got a very bare bones system that will display packets, but doesn't have a whole graphical desktop to it, which is very common for servers. So T-Shark is the equivalent of that. It's going to be a little bit less verbose, but you get many of the same features that you get in Wireshark. And while we're kind of looking through and trying to find other questions and trying to find that command line for T-Shark on how to show all the display filters, if you have a favorite packet capture tool and want to recommend it to other people, put in the name, and if you've got one, a link to the website where people can find out more about it. Feel free to put it into chat, and we can share the knowledge between us. How can you grab bytes data, for example, a PNG, and get an image out of it? Ah, wonderful. Arun Kasala. I've used this tool. There's one that will watch the wire. It will identify packet streams like those coming from a web server or an FTP server or whatever you've got, and it will make the images for those files come up inside its display. And I'm drawing a blank on the name of it right off the top of my head. I can't remember. Does anybody remember the name of that tool? Should you capture packets during production time? That's a tough one, and that depends on, first off, do you have permission to do so? The second thing I would suggest, first of all, capturing packets is not an active task. It is not making changes to what goes by on your network wire. It's not blocking packets. It's not diverting them to where they never make it to their destination. So the simple act of capturing packets is not necessarily destructive or likely to cause problems. So assuming you've got permission, it's a generally safe thing to do. However, it would never hurt to take the command that you're intending to run on a production network and first go over to a test network and run that task over on the test network before you try to run it over on the production network. That's just a suggestion. It is not a you must do it this way, but it's something that I would tend to do. Netminer, that's possible. Yeah, I can't remember the name of it, but that's a very reasonable one to try. Yep. Let's see. T-Shark can be hard to read if you need to look for certain things, but it's still great to use. Absolutely, because you get so much out of it. It and tcpdump really do kind of run in parallel on their capabilities. tcpshark-W specifies the display filter. Very nice. Great. Ray Davidson, I've done exercises where he extracted packets from a PCAP file and reassembled them using merge-cap. Yes, absolutely. So you might have a packet capture process that grabs packets and then saves them into 15-minute per file chunks. But then if you want to go and analyze them all at once, you can use merge-cap to say, grab me these 96 15-minute files, make one big one for the entire day, and then I can feed that file into another tool. Can you see the origin of an SSH connection with a packet capture tool? ChampK, absolutely. So what I'm going to show here, if I run a packet capture tool, I want you to imagine that this second, yeah, it's not showing up on the screen. Ryan, do I need to? There we go. He's good. I love it. So instead of 443 on this particular slide, let's say that this said 22. And so I was looking at traffic that was going to an SSH server. Well, the nice part is every packet needs a source IP address and a destination IP address. So the one on the left is the laptop that opened the connection to the other IP address, which is this IP address over on the right. You can see both IP addresses when you run a packet capture tool like tcpdump. All right. I think we are pretty close to the end. If anybody would like to come up and give some closing thoughts, I'm open to it. All right. Well, in that case, thank you very much for taking part today. The webcast chat that we've been using today, the live webcast chat channel, will continue to be available after the webcast is over. Keep in mind, if you're watching this on YouTube, the chat there will not be available, but you can always come to the Threat Hunter Community Discord and log in after the webcast is over. You're welcome to continue to ask questions. We'll do our best to answer them when time allows, and you can always answer questions for each other. Thank you for your interest, and we look forward to chatting with you on a future webcast.
Hey, thank you very much, Bill. That was awesome. Great.
Sounds great, guys.